bless us, encourage us, go before us, strengthen us, be right alongside us in everything that we do, in all the brokenness of this world. Father, excite us, and how compassionate and caring you are. Amen.
of Adventists surveyed struggle with an addiction of some kind. I'm sure that number's higher. The reason why we are having a talk on addiction today is because we want to address the needs of the church. And not too many people will talk about addiction, but today we're going to. So before we do, let's bow our heads for prayer. Our Heavenly Father, today we're going to talk about addiction and all the things that are pleasurable in the world, but that can lead to either a bad habit or destructive lifestyle. And Father, we just ask that your wisdom come amongst us this morning so that we can glean what we need either for ourselves or for others that we know. In the name of Jesus we pray, amen. Okay, I'm going to take a different format today. Yesterday was a bit more of a lecture, tried to cram in tons of information, may have been completely confusing. So today I'm going to do the Jesus format, which is some stories. I think we can learn an immense amount from people and from each other. There's not one amongst us that's the wisest. It's the collective that leads to wisdom. And I believe that God has given us these relationships to work with that we can learn from each other. So we're going to take our time and talk a little bit about addiction. And I'll probably be sitting a little bit more today, if that's okay. It's partially because I'm getting older. Thank you, Dale, for that reminder. I know you are. We have a very active, healthy relationship in our church. It's good. It's good. I want to read you a Bible text to start. This is found in Thessalonians, and we're going to be looking at chapter 5, verse 6 to 8. And it says this: "So then let us not be like others who are asleep, but let us be awake and sober. For those who sleep, sleep at night, and those who get drunk at night. But since we belong to the day, let us be sober, putting on the faith and love as a breastplate, and the hope of salvation as a helmet." So here we are to be bringing faith and love and hope of salvation to all those around us. We're to live in the day. We're to be of sober mind at all times. I came from a family that saw a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So I'm probably going to not get into detail. But I remember being a kid and thinking, I want to be different. I want to be of sober mind. I want to have my faculties about me at all times. I really want to be wise. I think that's the quality that I admired the most, is just good wisdom. So, because our church was filled with good men and good women, and my mom, I had the opportunity to learn some good stuff. And so today I'm going to try to give you some good stuff. I'm going to try. We'll see what happens. But the one area of therapy I did not want to work was in addictions. I remember taking my training from Loma Linda, and I'm like, nope. I hate addictions. I saw too much of it. There's no way I'm going near it. And here I spent the bulk of my career in it. During that time, there are some big lessons that I learned, and I learned the hard way through experience, being broken down and rebuilt as a therapist. Lots of lessons, lots of misunderstandings of what addiction was. So I'm going to give you 5 big lessons that I learned in addictions, and I'm going to tell them those lessons through the form of stories. So, let side. Many of you know him, or maybe you don't. He's a doctor that specifically worked with those afflicted with addictions, homeless, very violent neighborhood. And he would have this incredible bad habit that when someone came into him as a doctor, he would ask questions. He would take the time to get to know someone. He rarely would even get into what, okay, get out the notepad and, like he just wanted to get to know people, and it rubbed people wrong. Now they're embracing him because he's learned so many lessons and he has so much to teach. But his big point was ask a million questions and get to know someone. Walk a mile in their shoe before you presume to know what their journey's been like. So he said this about addiction. Addiction is any pattern of behavior that you crave, you find some temporary relief or pleasure in, but it has negative long-term consequences, and you can't give it up despite the negative consequences. Now, Dr. Carroll talked a lot about pleasure. We were created to experience pleasure. We are created by God in his image to experience pleasure. How we do that makes all the difference in the world. And so here we are, we're looking at long-term consequences. I've unfortunately been in the hospital when babies are being ripped out of their mother's arms for good reasons, unfortunately, because they were born addicted. And so the obvious idea is to take the babies and put them in a safe home where they're not going to be exposed. But just to hear you could actually hear the mother's heart breaking. Like it was auditory almost. It still hits me to this day. So here we are. You can't give it up despite the negative consequences. That's how powerful it is. Lesson number 1. Here we go. Timer. Okay, 11:30. No, I got it today down. Maybe I'll use it. We'll see. Addiction grabs anyone. I'll even go as far as to say this. I think everyone struggles with an addiction of some kind. I honestly believe that. There is something we turn to that will give us temporary relief or escape or pleasure or something that if somebody tried to cut that off from your life, you would fight. I really believe that. So, let me tell you about my first group in group therapy. A lot of the stories I'm telling you, people have given me permissions. I'm not going to obviously give names and specific details. You'll never, you'll not know who they are, but they really want the stories to get out there. Remember the first group I went to? Get in a group therapy room, dressed up in my tie, walk in, and I clearly didn't fit. Learned that lesson real quick. Got to fit in a bit. Got everybody to go around the room and say what their name is and what they did for a living. First one, I'm a nurse. I'm pretty sure my face reacted. Next one, I'm a teacher. Next one, I'm an addiction counselor. Plumber, mechanic, doctor. And I gotta admit, I was shocked. That floored me. I'm sure that first session was a mess because I was processing. It completely blew my mind with who's affected by addiction. It can affect anyone. I don't care who you are. my pet peeves is when someone says, "Oh yeah, those homeless people and drug addicts down on the street." That just drives me nuts. I'm like, you have no idea. You really don't. So, anyone want to know who the largest group of people overdosing from heroin is? What part of society? What dentists, professionals? Okay, you guys are actually pretty good. You're on it. It's not downtown east side. I know. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's actually lawyers. Lawyers sitting in their really expensive, nice apartments, professional, all by themselves, isolating and overdose. So if we think we know who's using and overdosing, we need to sit up and pay attention. Next, do you know what the largest group of people overdosing from marijuana is? Want to take a guess? Teens? That's my guess. Retired people? So, in the California's been experimenting with sort of legalizing and compassionate forever, but Colorado was one of the first states in the U.S. that decided to legalize marijuana recreationally. And they were freaking out. They were prepared for an onslaught of youth coming into the OR and just flooding the hospital. Like they actually staffed for that purpose. And they did initially see an uptick, mild, slight, of youth starting to use marijuana. And then guess what? It leveled down to a flat line of what it was before. Those who were using were using. What they saw in Colorado was a massive spike in overdoses from retired people. And specifically, these marijuana gummies. It could absolutely blew their mind because they would try a marijuana gummy. Oh, I don't feel anything. Try another one. I don't feel anything. Little did they know they have to wait an hour. Oh, try another one. Here, pretty soon they'd eat a whole bag of these gummies. I'm not feeling anything. And the next thing they realize they're waking up in emergency. So it's actually elderly. So what we think we know, I think you'd be surprised. Addiction grabs anyone. The safest strategy that we're teaching right now is do nothing. Now, I know for us in the Christian walk and in the Adventist church, that's an obvious one. Just don't recreationally use drugs. But we're teaching this in the general public now. Just don't try recreational drugs, period. Because it's laced and it's super powerful. Marijuana in the 50s and 60s used to be at about a 4 or 5% THC level, maybe even 3. It was pretty mild. The BC Bud has been winning international competitions, and it's around 35 to 45% THC right now. It's incredibly powerful. It is not the same drug. And a lot of times I heard in group, oh yeah, but I get my stuff from my dealer. It's the good stuff. It's the pure stuff. My dealer tells me it is. And I've even had dealers in groups say, yeah, I only grow the good stuff. You know, I don't lace it. That's ridiculous. And then I let everybody go in the group room and then, hey, come here. Pull the drug dealer back in. Come here. What are you saying? Well, of course I lace my stuff, he says. That's why it's the good stuff, and they want to come back to me. So it doesn't matter what you think you're using, chances are it's got stuff in it. It's just not recreational drug use anymore. It is super, super unsafe. It's dangerous. And now with fentanyl, so there's cocaine, then there's 100 times more powerful fentanyl, then there's 100 times more powerful, which is carfentanil. I mean, just a grain of like a salt, the size of a salt, can kill someone. It's an elephant tranquilizer. that's what's being used now. So you just don't know. So if you know somebody that's thinking of experimenting or starting to, I mean, come alongside of them like you're glue and gently, hey, let's go hiking. Let's go do this today. Let's go motorbiking in the mountains. Let's go do something. Um, it's a war. So you want to treat it like that. Okay, next lesson I learned. So not only does it affect everyone, next lesson is it's more than substances. Yes, I absolutely have control of this slide. Why don't I flip that to number 2? Someone else should probably. Okay, this is going to be a long lecture today. Okay, number 2, addiction is more than substances. A lot of times when we think that someone is an addiction, we think of what? What are the drugs, alcohol, sex, pornography? Okay, well, most of the time people think of substances. But substances are on one hand, but there's something else called process addictions that's on the other. And that is things like pornography, um, shopping, eating, working. Boy, I'd need to explore that one. What's a bad behavior and what's an addiction? So I'd have to explore that one a bit. Gaming, buying cars. There's some debate here, all right. It's okay. We can. But one of the lessons I had to learn right away is, what do you mean you're addicted to shopping? What do you mean you're addicted to gaming? What are you talking about? It's not alcohol. It's not cocaine. It's not, whatever. But there's 2 distinct addictions that people need to consider when they say addiction. And it's just as equally powerful when they do brain scans with someone that's ingesting cocaine and when they do brain scans of someone that's gaming or looking at pornography, the same part of the brain lights up. It's dopamine. Now, there are some differences, obviously, and especially when you mix substances, like when you mix cocaine and alcohol, there's actually a 3rd substance that's created that's pretty powerful together. So that's why usually those 2 go hand in hand. But, there are some differences, but by and large, the same part of the brain lights up. I remember one time a guy came into group and he said, I don't think I can share with everyone what my addiction is. I'm like, okay, well, let's not worry about it right now. Let's just sort of get to know each other. And then later, he had the guts, I want to say, the guts to share what his addiction is. And he said, I think my addiction is church. And the whole group laughed at him. That's not an addiction. Get out of here. What are you even in here for? That's ridiculous. Judging him. Like my addiction, mine's a real addiction. Yours isn't. Sometimes there's fights between people with, oh, well, you're just that. I'm this. That's a much more serious addiction. But he just started to describe, and if you go through the DSM, it starts to tick off all the boxes for what an addiction is in the DSM. Loses friends because of his addiction. He was serving so many hours at church, losing friends over it. His family was destructing. All his money was being poured into the church. All he could ever think about was serving at church. And while it's noble to want to serve God, I absolutely get it. You're on fire, you're passionate. I'm pretty sure most of the disciples would have struggled with this one. You want it, once you know, right? Like you want to serve. But unfortunately, his family and all those around him were being lost because of it. That was a tough one to hear. I hadn't heard that one before. It's more than than substances. Another time, there was a woman that was engaged to be married to somebody actually quite famous. And he died. And she was so distraught over it and went into such a, there's grief and then there's complicated grief. People that are unable to move out of the grieving cycle. It's complicated grief once you stay there. She had such a severe case of complicated grief and went into such a depression over it that she became anorexic because she was purging. She developed an eating disorder so that she could continue to stay trim and fit into that wedding dress because she expected him to walk in the door any minute. She couldn't believe that it was real. And it became her primary addiction. She had a secondary addiction of drinking, but the primary addiction was her eating disorder, disordered eating. And unfortunately, it's so tragic. Right when she quit, she went through the grieving process. She's such an amazing woman. I love her to death. Quit alcohol. Started to get her teeth worked on because in eating disorders you can lose your teeth. She died in her sleep as a result of getting her teeth fixed. It was a complication. It was a gag reflex thing, and it was so tragic and so sad. But her addiction was trying to fit into that wedding dress, and through disordered eating. Another time, I was called out of our center to assist a cop. Sometimes we have to revive people that have overdosed. So quickly ran out, brought the Narcan kit, revived a gentleman. He sat up. He was flatlined. He was gone, like dead. Revived him. He sat up, and he got so mad at the cop that he hit the cop. He's like, "You just destroyed my high." And the cop and I just look at each other, and the cop whacks him on the head. "You were just dead. You were flatlined. I just saved your life and revived you." And the guy was furious at him. He said, "Well, I'm going to go find another high." And he got up and walked away. And the cop said something very profound, and I remember it hit me. He said, "This happens so often that we actually know that there's brain damage being caused every time you flatline and you have to be revived. So a lot of people that have been flatlined 30, 40 times, that not sure whether there's the mental capability of even making a decision to stop or to quit." But I remember the cop said something really profound. He said, "I wonder if people are getting addicted to the high of dying and being revived. It's more than just the addiction." And I'm like, how on earth can you be addicted to dying? I would never have thought of that. But he said we see it so many times, and it's almost like that's what they're going for because they inject so much. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's right. There's almost a sense of pride. Excuse me. Yeah, addiction cannot be underestimated. It is very powerful. So I went to a conference with, I don't know, there may be 500 doctors and professionals. And we did a very interesting exercise. And oh my word. Yeah, don't know if I'm going to tell that story, but they asked us to give up the iPhone, people's phones, the doctor, to give up their phone. They're like, "Oh yeah, for sure, we can give up our phone." I'm like, "Really? Okay." So the presenter played with them. And they said, "I want you to hold your breath." So everyone, hold your breath. Okay? Actually, let's try it. Ready? Everybody hold your breath. 1, 2, 3. So for some of us, keep holding. For some of us, we'll last a little while, exhale. Others will last longer. Exhale, you want your breath. Some of us will really try to push it, start to turn red, start to faint. Please, nobody get to that point. No fainting. Um, the doctor said, right when you're about to exhale and take in another breath, I'm going to come and choke you so that you can't breathe. And the doctor talked about how, the presenter talked about how, you can exhale if you need to. The doctor talked about how holding your breath, and just when you're needing to breathe, someone coming alongside of you and choking you, then you're like, at first you're like, laughing, that's funny, let go of your hands. And then they see they're not letting go of their hands. And then they're starting to panic a bit. Then they're starting to fidget quite a lot. Their body's reacting and starting to, what's that response, nurses? When you're something. Yeah, convulsing. You're starting to convulse, like you're needing to get that breath. It gets so violent that you're wanting the breath, you're starting to push the other person. You're ready to clock them. It doesn't even matter if someone is taking your kid away at that point. You're needing that breath, or else you'll die. And they said, welcome to understanding addiction. It doesn't matter what's taken away from you. The first thing you can think about is, I need that in order to live. That's how powerful addiction is. And so they talked about how when you make a decision to quit something, sometimes you'll hear, oh, never again. And then other people are one moment at a time, an hour at a time. There's a whole different gamut of beliefs on what people should believe. Never again, or one moment at a time. And the presenter went on to say, think of it this way. This is the healthiest we've found for quitting addiction. Ready? This is it. I want you to imagine the longest you can go with anything. What's the longest you could safely, confidently say, I can last this long without using this? Or whatever it is, right? What's the longest you can confidently say you can go? Make a commitment to go that long. That you can confidently say, I'll make it this far. Then, when you get to that point, to honestly sit back and consciously make the decision, okay, how much longer could I go? Could I make the same commitment of another hour? Could I, another day? Could I make that decision to confidently say, I'm going to go another hour or day or whatever it is? 3 weeks. Some people were like 3 weeks. I could make it 3 weeks. And then when you get to that point, keep making that recommitment decision. I'm going to go that much longer. I'm going to go that much longer. And what we found in addiction treatment is that has been the most effective way of assessing how long somebody can go. Because some programs will say never again. Some programs will say 1 day at a time. But what research is showing is, since everybody is so completely different, that you just want to make that commitment that you can confidently go and then keep recommitting. Okay, next. Where are we? We should be on, is it 3? Dopamine, the natural high part of the brain. All substances and processes that cause dependence affect dopamine levels. We talked a little bit about that already, that part of the brain that lights up. Next one, lesson number 3, rat park. So, famous study, everybody presents about it. You probably talk about it, Dr. Carroll, every once in a while in your lectures. They used to believe that addiction was caused because they studied rats. So on one side of the cage, they put water. On the other side of the cage, they put water mixed with cocaine or heroin. What they found was, in this little tiny cage, all the rats would go over to the water with cocaine and heroin, they'd all drink from it, they'd all eventually die. That's addiction. You make it available to people, they'll use it, they'll die. But in the 1970s, a researcher in Vancouver said, well, hang on, that doesn't seem like that's real life, to put them in a cage like this. So he developed something cool, super cool, called Rat Park. It was this massive city of rats. They had places where they could play with balls, they had food, abundant food available, they had quiet, cozy places for intimate, I'm trying to think, activities. We're adults here, we'll just say sex. So they had sex available, they had playing with equipment, they had places to rest and to sleep. They had everything. Rat Park was like it. It was utopia. But they did the same thing. They put water on one side and water with heroin and cocaine, or cocaine on the other side. They found that hardly any rats went to drink the cocaine or heroin water. Hardly any. In fact, many didn't. They were busy living life and having fun. And so they realized that A, not everyone gets addicted, which we talked about. But the next one is your environment is everything. Where you are and what you're surrounded with. There are people that we find when we ask, well, describe your life as you were getting into addiction. Their world got smaller and smaller and smaller. They slowly started pushing people out of their life. They started finding less hobbies of ways of being engaged. Their recreational activity disappeared. Eventually, I know I'm going off camera, but that's okay. Eventually, they're hiding in the corner recesses of their dungeon room, basement suite, and that's where they're engaging in their addiction. It's quiet. It's just this. It's shrunk to the small world. So one of the biggest things that we did in addiction treatment is we have to expand the environment, expand the world, get people back involved in all kinds of activities. I remember there was one guy that came in, big biker, just full of tats, like big guy. And one of the activities we had in the center was yoga. And it's not yoga where you're like the spiritual side of yoga. It was basically glorified stretching. So we had yoga. And the biker's like, I'm not doing no yoga, that's sissy, I'm not doing any of that, whatever. You know, he started really bashing it. I'm like, well, you came to us, and we're saying this is going to probably be helpful. Try it. Give it a try. What's the worst that can happen? So he tried yoga, this big biker guy. I wish I was there. It would have been funny. Next day, I see him, and I say, how's yoga? He's like, well, yoga instructor wasn't hard to look at. I'm like, okay, that's a start. We'll start there. See him the next few days. The next week, I see him walking around in these tights, this whole yoga outfit. He went to Lululemon and totally outfitted himself. I'm like, not sure I can unsee that. Glad you're enjoying yoga. Asked him at the end, what do you think was the thing that made the difference here? The biggest thing that helped you? And he said, yoga. Would never have guessed. But he said, I feel calm and centered and in control of my life when I'm in yoga. He said, I'm gonna take it everywhere. I'm gonna get a cat and I'm gonna get into yoga. I'm like, you do you, that's awesome. You never know. Environment is different. Okay, Portugal. Portugal is one of the most famous cities in the world because they caught on to this concept of expanding someone's environment, their life, their way of living. So Portugal decided they were going to take all the money they were pouring into drug enforcement, into the legal system, into treatment, into, well, sort of treatment, into all this sort of monitoring and coming down hard on anyone in the addiction world. they decided to completely throw that out the window. They're like, we're going to do a complete reinvent. So they took all the money they would normally pay into legal and policing and whatever. They decided to put it into treatment and counseling and job creation and retraining and housing and everything possible to help someone. And they found they still needed to enforce and catch not the users. They decriminalized. They decided to go after a select few of the dealers, like really just concentrate on the bigger dealers. But if you were using, you would get a slap on the wrist. So they came over to Vancouver and they gave a massive lecture. It was awesome. In the front row were a lot of the politicians. And he said, you guys have got it so wrong. You're trying to copy our model and you've got it wrong. You're taking the money out of the legal and policing, but you're not putting it into the things that are needed. You're doing a little bit, but we poured millions and millions of dollars into that. You're entertaining the idea of doing that. You're putting so little into treatment and into housing that you're missing the mark. So he went after them hard. But Portugal's one of the countries that really got it right. And so they understood that it's about relationships and getting back into the community. I forget what Scandinavian country it is, but they have a model where you get sent to live with somebody in their home. And you're forced to be part of a family. You're forced to live in a community. You're forced to get a job. You're forced to do all this. And they have one of the most successful ways of treating because people feel respected and part of the community again. It's amazing. So one of the biggest parts that people will miss out on and underestimate is a person's aftercare plan. So they'll go to treatment, they'll have access to this amazing program, they're cocooned, they have support everywhere, but then they leave the front door to what? And they go back to their same place, their same triggers, their same home, their same connections and friends, and guess what? Everything becomes the same again. So it is a huge deal to transition people slowly out of something and into a new lifestyle. That's a big part of the puzzle that we had to learn, that it's in relationships after you leave that are vitally important. Next one, we talked about this a little bit yesterday. God wired us to be in relationship. He created us to be that way. And we certainly talked about that when we went through the book of Genesis with Dr. Carroll. So, and one of I watched a movie scene one time where Jesus, the woman who was being stoned, right? So she's being stoned. And I remember the scene in this movie that, he asked all the accusers to throw the first stone, the people that are blameless and sinless, and they all peeled off, they took off. And then he got down and he took her hand and he lifted her face. Where are your accusers now? Neither do I condemn you. And the compassion that he had, this actor the compassion he had in his face changed me. It was powerful. And so when we look at anyone that struggled or is condemned, how do we look at them? How do we interact with them? How do we talk to them? Is it with that same compassion? And I had to completely change from being this cold professional with my tie on to being someone a Christian that truly cared about each and every single person that walked through that door. And I gotta say, it is very hard. It was tough, wasn't always successful. I made a lot of mistakes. But to truly care about somebody. So when Jerry talks about having a heart, had to find that heart and dig in deep and develop it. What voices have. Okay. When someone stops using, there are now fewer receptor sites receiving less dopamine. This can cause an inability to experience pleasure. This does regulate itself, and a person will experience pleasure again. It just takes time. For example, anyone that uses ecstasy, E, they use it, they feel in love with everybody. Oh, this plant, look at this plant. It is beautiful. Like they really just fall in love, right? That part of the brain, when ecstasy stimulates serotonin in the brain, it just walks up to the serotonin factor and starts beating on the door. Make more serotonin so you can feel love, right? It's pounding and pounding on the door. Someone that chronically uses ecstasy, that factory that produces ecstasy is flattened. It's no longer existent. Eventually, it's depleted. It's overworked so much. It can take up to 2 years in research before a person will naturally produce serotonin again and feel normal in the loving relationships. So some of these things just take time. They just do. Okay, next one is, this was a big one for me. I fought a lot over this one with a lot of people. Is it a disease model, the medical model, or is it a choice? And even in this room, if we were to take a survey, it would be actually pretty split down the middle. You'd be surprised. It is. So what we had to realize is there's the medical model, which is prescribed medications to quit. You go through clinical treatment. You can, it'll talk about it's a disease. You have no choice. You have no power over it. There's different phraseology. Sometimes there's 12-step can be associated with the disease model. Sometimes it's not. It sort of fluctuates a bit. Then there's what's called a biopsychosocial model, which is, it looks at all different kinds of the wellness wheel and says you have a choice and you have power over things. But then it sometimes doesn't recognize how it does affect the body and how we do need medications. So there's a bit of a fight. And here's what I want to say about it. Everybody is different. What we teach, what we've been learning to teach, is you find what your model is and choose what's called an adaptive model. You make it work for you. There are benefits to a lot of these models. The 12-step AA approach, you can go anywhere in the world and have access to support. Anywhere. That's phenomenal. Like if we were right now in Spain, we could get access to a group and go get support and help. Like that's amazing. You find the model that works for you. It's going to take everybody on board. It just is. The problem is family are not necessarily good to help out. They are often part of the problem. But with family consultations, meetings, other professionals, in essence, you develop your own program, you develop your own team. It's going to take a big team. Another thing it's going to take is some time. I had a 2-hour argument with a psychiatrist once. I couldn't believe he had the time. I'm sure he didn't, actually. I was mad. I was not unprofessional, but boy, I was passionate. A woman was in my group, and she was hearing voices a lot. It happens, and I completely believe her, 100%. It often is. You see spiders crawling on your skin. There are spiders. Like, it's very real. Argued with this. So this woman was communicating apparently with me with telepathy during group, and after a group, she came up to me and was mad because I was ignoring her. And she said, I just want to kill you right now. I want to, okay, let's talk about it. So I sent her to the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist said, She'll be fine. Just keep her in the treatment center. She'll be fine in a month. Just keep her off the substances. I'm like, no, this is pretty substantial. This was before her using. This was a mental health issue. Like, she really needs harder clinical help. You need to admit her. We fought. It was heated. Um, he never admitted her. She came back. There were a few things that happened. She was discharged. And because there's very little services, her uncle did something radical, pretty much illegal. He kidnapped her. He took her home, made her a suite in his basement, had locks, but gave her food, gave her everything. So that's pretty extreme. Like, she could have sued him and he could go to jail. But he was very passionate about helping her. 6 months later, I was in a park on a break, and a lady walked up to me and said, "Hi." I said, "Hi." And we had this lovely discussion. She said, "You don't remember me, do you?" I'm like, "No, should I?" And she said, "Well, yeah, I'm so-and-so." And I thought she had permanent damage. Never would I have guessed she could be this woman presenting herself in front of me. And so just when we think someone's gone too far, God made us in such a way that we can heal through so much. Never underestimate the healing power of what God has designed us to get through. Very powerful. So, what works for one may not work for another. So we know that. Last lesson. Addiction just makes sense. Now, this is troubling to a lot of people. Why are they in there in addiction? Why can't you just quit? Why did you even get into it? You came from a good home. You don't have any problems in your life. Why are you addicted? Like, the questions we ask are just so, come from a place of not even remotely wanting to understand. So, I want you to look at addiction in this frame. If you can look at addiction this way, I think you'll understand why addiction works. They are fulfilling a need. There's a need in someone's life that gets met with addiction. Otherwise, they wouldn't go to their addiction. Like, yes, there are people that can be addicted to chemicals and substances, but often there is something they're looking for: pleasure, escape, numbing out. I remember there was this young woman she's in her 20s, but a woman that came to group, and she had been ritualistically passed around ever since she was a little girl to men. My heart, I'm pretty sure a piece of my heart died that day, just hearing her story. If you don't believe that there's evil in the world, you would, if you listen to those stories. My wife says that my character's actually changed. My personality has changed from all the years of hearing the stories. I hit my quota, that I'm done. And it's stories like that one. But she taught me something more than I'm pretty sure any church or person in our church has ever taught me about love and forgiveness. She said, she wrote this amazing letter of forgiveness to her abusers, all of them. And we were in the group. We couldn't believe this was coming from this woman. Are these real? Do you mean what you're saying? We're all just crying in disbelief of what we're hearing. You're actually forgiving? These are monsters, real life monsters. Of course I believe every word I'm saying. I want to be free. Forgiveness is not about them, it's about me and me moving forward. said something very profound. She said, I know what love is not. Now I want to find what love is. And I thought, oh, if only some of us in the church could look away from people we're hanging on to, all this resentment and bitterness and judgment and all of that. It takes mental energy to hang on to that. The faster we can let go of that garbage, the more we can get on to what she was exploring, which is, I want to see what love is capable of. I love that. I love that. Funny, well, not really funny story. 65. One woman retired, 65. She's like, what's all this talk about addiction? I've never experienced anything. She said, I think I'm going to try drinking. She was bored. Lost her vision or need or her identity in her life because she retired. And so I think I'm going to check out addiction. So she became an alcoholic in 2 years. For her, it was the need to be able to find a new identity. So please don't ever ask the question, why are you in addiction? Because if you walk for a mile in someone's shoes, it'll make sense to you. Out of the probably tens of thousands of people I've seen, only one person never made sense. After you hear their story from front to end, you're like, yep, I would probably do that too. Makes sense to me. And what I want to propose is, I don't think we ask enough questions. So, what are some takeaway points really quickly? Walking away from addiction is a process. It's not an event. Yes? Yes? Okay, well that would take another few hours, if not a day. I would love to sit down with you and talk, because I actually want to hear, you used to be a physician, correct? I would love to talk with you about that. So let's make some time afterwards. I believe there are elements of both. Unfortunately, the disease model doesn't leave room for choice. That what? We're not. I almost. Yeah. Well, yeah. There's a panel tomorrow, but I don't even think that one could be answered in a panel in an hour. That's a big one. It's a process, not event. You can't send someone to go get fixed. Why don't you just go to treatment and quit? Whoa, hang on. Not that easy. That is a really big oversimplification. That's not healthy at all. It's a process. It took a while to get into addiction. It's going to take a while to get out. It takes a while to develop this abused sort of not free mentality, years of neglect and hurt, and it's going to take a little while to get out of it. And you have to want to get out of it. So understand that it's a process. In fact, does anybody know on average how many times it takes for a woman to walk away from an abusive relationship, or a man? Either way. Anyone know? How many attempts does it take to be able to walk away permanently from an abusive relationship? 7 on average. 7. Guess what they found? On average, how many times does it take someone to walk away from their addiction, whether it be going to a church group, an AA group, treatment center, detox, whatever? It's the exact same amount. On average, it takes 7 times.
Why do you have 27 written there?
One gentleman had gone to 27 addiction treatment centers. And he said, I don't have a family. This is where I find family, is in treatment centers. So for him, it wasn't about treatment anymore. It was about connection. connection and relationship, which is the whole point of this series this week. It's all about relationships. That's what's going to save us. So relationships win the day. You know, Proverbs talks multiple times about a wise man has many counselors. We need each other to be able to get us through what we need to get through. So encourage people in your life to open up, come alongside of them, zip it. Just stay with them. I remember my daughter was at a parade and a little kid was crying because they didn't get any candy. She was probably 3 or 2, something small. She saw a little kid crying because they didn't get any candy. So she came alongside of them, Angela, and she sat down and didn't say a word. I'm like, how do you understand pain and connection better than most of us adults? Just come alongside and show that you love them. But then I'm going to contradict that and say, assume that you know nothing about addiction and about that person, and ask a lot of questions. In fact, assume everything you know is wrong. Ask 1,000 questions and get to know someone and be in relationship with them. So, don't know if we have time for questions. They are tomorrow. I'll stick around, but tomorrow will also be a panel that will have lots of questions that we will attempt to answer. But those are some quick and dirty lessons over the years that I hope you were able to glean from and understand a little bit more about addiction and through these stories and these examples. So God bless, and thank you for having us. Thank you.
Oh, there I am. Okay. I was scared I was going to yell and it was going to get turned on. James, thank you so much. And I wish we had more time. I wanted to be respectful and end this session because I know people have lunch tickets. And there's only a certain amount of time you can get into the cafeteria and get your lunch. So I'm going to close with our song and a prayer. And if you guys have any questions and you want to stick around and ask James, he's going to be right up here. By all means, do so. If you have questions that you want to ask tomorrow on the panel, again, this entire time is going to be spent just with the panel discussion. So I've got a few formulated questions that I'll be modulating, and then we'll take some questions. Now, before you come with your questions tomorrow, know that I'm only going to allow 2 minutes maximum for your question, okay? So just formulate your questions around that 2-minute max mark, okay? Let's stand together and sing Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus. Yeah, a cappella. Yeah. Ready? Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for being our Redeemer. Help us, Lord, to keep our eyes and hearts fixed on you, to live a life modeled after your example of being a healer, a compassionate healer. Help us to march forward upon this earth in that same fashion. And if each one of us is healing, we'll also be healed. Father, thank you for James and Carol for their presentations. Bless the panel discussion tomorrow and the questions. We have way more questions than we have time, but help us to get to the essential ones, the ones that you see as priority, Lord. Bless the meal that's going to happen. Continue to bless camp meeting in a special way. Bless our meetings tonight. Be with the baptisms that are coming. And if there's anybody else who's feeling the call to recommit their life to Christ, may they answer that call and come see one of us pastors so that we could line them up as necessary. All these things are asked in the powerful name of Jesus Christ. Amen. All right, guys, thank you so much.